All right. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer here again on LinkedIn Live. How you doing? We got a couple of folks coming in nicely. Greg McLaughlin, always first in line. Happy to have you there, Greg, on the rope drop here on LinkedIn Live. Talking today about a really interesting topic, data sharing. Do you dare to share? I see a lot of folks are saying hello. Hi, all your hellos here. I'm going to try and talk off of a couple of slides and give you a preamble and just some context. And then I'll take a look at the comments and so on. But glad people are coming in. Let me know where you're calling in from as usual. Great to be here. Scott Taylor, Data Whisperer. Hope everybody's having a good time out there, hunkering down, staying in place. The world's starting to open up again. We're starting to connect a little more, and we're going to talk a whole lot about that from a data perspective in terms of sharing. So I'm very excited to have the folks from CDQ on, Corporate Data Quality. Kai Hüner is going to be joining us. He's the CTO and co-founder of this really interesting data sharing community that I think is going to be something that, let me just put it this way, I haven't seen anything like it. And not to be too pitchy here, but I see a lot of things, okay? I've seen a lot of different kinds of data. I've talked to all different kinds of companies. This is not something that I've literally seen anywhere, even though the premises may be familiar in some other context. So let me share a couple of ideas here, speaking of which. So first of all, data sharing is a concept. Just to get it out of the way right up front. We're not talking about personal data. We're talking about commercial data. So before some of you privacy folks start freaking out about, okay, what about sharing this and this PII and GDPR and all that? It's not that domain at all, okay? So we're talking about commercial data. And even though it's not a thing yet, let me suggest it might be a category called CII, commercially identifiable information. All right, that's not official. It's not in Wikipedia yet, but maybe we'll work on it. But that kind of thing is what we're talking about here. So we're really focused on the commercial side of it. Let me hide this here. I do want to put this in here. If anytime during this you want to learn more, just hit share. Just type the word share in the comments, and we'll be sure to give you more on this because we're just going to touch on a couple of basic ideas here. We're not going to go too deep, so it's really interesting. So, and the perspective I bring, as many of you know, my perspective in terms of folks I've talked to in the data space around enterprise data and so on, it's limited. It's limited to enterprises in commercial activity on Earth, okay? That's the scope. So if you're not an enterprise, you're not in commerce, and you're not on Earth, then this might not be that relevant. But if you are all three of those things, which most of you are, I hope, this is going to be something I think you want to take a look at. So we're talking about commercial data, not personal data when it comes to sharing, so I don't want to see anybody picking at me about that. So every enterprise, again, every enterprise I've ever dealt with in commerce on Earth has struggles with what we could call party data, relationship data, company data, the data about the entities that you do business with, either because you sell to them, or you buy from them, or you partner with them in some other way, but other companies, organizations that you interact with. And they all struggle acquiring this data, managing this data, and to a great extent, trusting this data. And this is the foundational data of every type of business. You've heard me rant on this before. This is truly master data, reference data, metadata, that basic stuff that we all use to structure the relationships we have in business. So if I've met you, I know you have this issue. There's a lot of different ways that people are trying to tackle it. I'm not suggesting that people haven't figured parts of this out yet, but just want to give you a preamble on some of the context here. Yes, I'm seeing some yeses in here, so I'm getting some positive reinforcement on this approach. Data sharing is not a totally unique concept. Obviously, it's not the first place that data sharing is going on, and I've seen data sharing, and a lot of you have seen data sharing in a lot of different contexts. There's a lot of marketplaces and exchanges out there, and those tend to be kind of data supermarkets, places where you can go to get commercial and syndicated data. Microsoft's got one. Amazon's working on it. Google's got one. Data.com out of Salesforce, that was a big thing for a while. It's away now. But that basic premise of a source of syndicated data that you can share either in a marketplace or an exchange. Most of those I've found, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it if I'm going the wrong way, most of those that I've found are really about kind of analytical use cases. It's really convenient to go if you're doing a data science project or you've got some sort of project going on that you need additional data about a certain topic area. You go out and grab that stuff. And it's highly structured, although their structure may not map to your structure. That's an issue we're definitely going to deal with later. And, you might even use your credit card to pay for it. But I find that these are kind of analytical use cases, kind of ad hoc, a little bit tactical. Nothing disparaging about it, not to say that those aren't valuable, but in terms of the data sharing I'm talking about, that's not the data sharing I'm talking about, okay? There's also platforms out there which are really cool. So probably the coolest one out there right now is Snowflake. Cool. You'd have to call Snowflake cool. You don't want to call them hot, right? That's the wrong mixed metaphor. You don't want to mess that up. But Snowflake's out there and they're talking about, they allow people to access and view your data while it still resides in your world. Now, I'm not going to get too technical here, but that's very interesting, right? So you can share data with another party, whatever you want. They get to look at the same data you've got. I haven't delved too deeply into this, but again, I don't think it's so much for the operational stuff. But that premise of building a platform where everybody can share data, very cool, but it tends to be a closed interaction and limited relationships. And again, the purpose of it, I think, is more analytical or research oriented. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I see. Then there are providers out there, syndicated data providers, and that's where I got my start in the business. So Nielsen, D&B, two iconic data brands out there, they build their business off of a data sharing consortium. So if you get D&B data, part of what's derived out of that is that they get the accounts receivable data from a lot of different companies. They pool it together and it helps them determine the credit worthiness of an entity. Great. It's a syndicated deliverable. Nielsen, same way. If you get Nielsen product movement data, that's shared data across a bunch of retailers. They pool it, they harmonize it, they structure it, they send it back with a lot of analytics on it, and that's great. So those kind of providers, that's not what I'm talking about either. So when I look at all these providers and I look at all these opportunities, I think about those as columns of data. So if you know me and you follow me, you know I rant a lot about rows versus columns. Rows or columns are what the rows are about. So if I've got a whole list of, XYZ brands and I go to a data marketplace and I want to find out more stuff about those brands, I get that stuff. But if their version of Coca-Cola doesn't match to my version of Coca-Cola, then the rows don't meet. I've got to do some work around that. Same thing if it's a party data. So if I've got, company widget maker XYZ and they're my vendor and I go and get other data from D&B or from one of these marketplaces, I've got to map that to mine as well, and some of those service providers do that matching and so on. But it's really about adding more columns. It's about enrichment. It's about metrics. It's about more the analytics and business insight you might get rather than the rows. I'm a row guy. You know me, I am a foundational row guy. Columns are what rows are about. Columns are easy. Rows are hard. If you don't get the rows right, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. So I'm talking about, in an essence here, how do you share the rows? Which I think is a really compelling approach to data sharing. So it won't be strictly the rows here and rows and columns. I'm sure some of you graph people are rolling your eyes at me, but it's just the way I talk to business people so they understand what we're trying to do, okay? You know me well enough to know that. So rows versus columns, and again, commercial data here, not personal data. So I'm going to just take a pause and take a look at some comments here that we got. Okay, somebody's already asked, all right, what about data privacy? We're going to talk about the privacy of the data, but Pablo, so you know when I started off, it's not about personal data. So a lot of the data we're talking about sharing can be even publicly available. It's more about having it structured, validated, and so on. This is something like Nielsen. Yeah, I just went through that. Let's see. Anybody else? Let's talk about external data. Scott, you're a star. I love that comment. I'm going to keep reading that comment. Thank you, Christelle. I appreciate that. So let me keep going here. So I'm going to bring in Kai Hüner from CDQ. I've unmuted him here. Let's have a warm tell your data story. Welcome to Kai. Here he is. Hi, Kai. How are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm fine. Thanks.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to talk about kind of what CDQ does, how you guys got started, the kind of companies you work at, and then we're going to delve into this, what I think is really interesting data journey part. But let me leave it over to you for a moment.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation to this session here. I like your comments very much regarding the rows and the columns, and let me maybe start with because I also saw the comments. We share data for sure. We share the rows, or we enable the sharing of the rows, but it's more sharing of data quality, right? It's more about the updates, the continuous inbound of data quality that we consolidate and share in the community. And this is something that we can talk about and maybe also collect some thoughts. You asked how we started. So actually we are some kind of spin-off of a university research program that is still running. It's the Competence Center, CDQ. It's also on LinkedIn. You can just search it. And from this research program, we started, I think it was 2010, some consulting services around data governance, data architecture, data strategy, all these things. And we realized in many of these consulting projects that especially for customer and vendor data, the requirements are more or less the same, right? Everyone is looking for up-to-date and complete legal addresses, tax numbers for corporate hierarchies and all these things. And not only about the same procedures and methods, but really about the same data, actually. I saw several guys in different companies maintaining the data for the exactly same real-world company, the address, the warehouse in China, the ship to, the bill to, all these things. And this is why we started around 4 to 5 years ago, this data sharing community, how we called it. It's a combination of platform and community where we enable what you described, the sharing, especially of rows between the peers. And as you said, it's not about contact data, it's not about private information, but about the more or less publicly available attributes like addresses, like text numbers, like legal names, and all these things. And this is maintained collaboratively in a community and a cloud platform. And this is developing well. And as far as we see, some kind of unique concept, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I skipped one of my slides. I wanted to talk about just the notion of a community. To have a successful community, you need trust. You need standards. You need governance, consistency, quality rules. I mean, all these pieces here that people really have to open up. But I think trust is paramount. So when I want to delve into more on the data side, but when we think about just inviting people or having people part of this community, how do you ensure that trust that's so critical?
Yes, for sure. So this trust has two components, right? On the one hand, there are the guys like us who provide the platform and the community, and of course the partners have to trust in us in the first stage to contribute and to align. And on the other hand, of course, they also have to trust into each other in terms of, are the others maintaining the data in a similar way like us? Do they have the same understanding of a legal address? What is a legal entity? How they manage ship tools, how they deal with tax numbers in certain countries. So there's much part of the conceptual foundation, like having the same rule set, the same understanding of the concepts and so on. And also, yes, more or less the same rigor on the processes, on the workflows. And this has to be established for sure, and that takes time. But as far as for our domain, the business partner data, we established it more or less for a small growing community. And this is what we would like to share with others to grow this kind of data sharing community.
Mm-hmm. And I know, whether you can share some of the names or not, I know some of them certainly from your deck and so on. We're not talking, so people know, we're not talking about a bunch of startups here. We're talking about global, industrial, manufacturing, I would call them hardcore companies in terms of their use of this party data, commercial partner data, and so on. So it's go ahead.
No, sorry, you can name them. So they're happy to be named because they, of course, also want to grow this community. It's companies like Bosch, like Siemens, also Nestle, Novartis. So really the large corporates from our region, Germany, Switzerland. And they, of course, have also an interest to grow this community because the more people really share the data, the more eyes you have on the data, the better it works.
And again, we're talking about the basic company data, not too much else on there. And I've found the same observation, which is when you start to go to a lot of these companies, which I have, and they talk about their objectives, they talk about their data governance approach, they even talk about, in some cases, their step-by-step process. It's remarkably similar between these organizations. So do you find that too? Kind of people open up that a Nestle and a Bayer and a Siemens might go, yeah, we're actually, not only do we want the same thing, but we're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always have to think about to my times as a data management consulting when we were involved in projects to write down the rules, how to maintain a Chinese address, how to maintain a Brazilian tax number, and so on. And of course, that's the same for all companies because it does not depend on their corporate rule sets, but on external reference. But each company is documenting this, is implementing these rule sets in their enterprise systems, and this part not only sharing the roles, as you said, but also finding or defining the same foundation, like data quality rules, like identifying all these requirements, is one part of our community work. So it's more or less the first step to establish this foundation, the rule set, the concepts, the address formats, things like that. And based on this foundation, then we enable the effective data sharing.
And a lot of that is stuff that they've got to, it's not very value-added activity for their organization. These aren't things that, your rule set for address format is not a competitive advantage. So that constant struggle, why do it on your own, is a lot of the experience I've had with some of these folks. Yeah, so we're getting a couple of people saying share. That's great. Do you want to take a look at this journey? I really like this journey idea, if we want to do that. Okay, we're going to get smaller here, but over on the side. What I think the folks at CDQ have done, and love for you to take us through this, Kai, is kind of everything is a journey. It's a phased approach, and you don't go right from doing nothing to here's everything I've got and I trust everything. So if you could kind of take people through this high-level journey, I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, for sure. So the first level, this data silos level, is more or less the situation the corporates have. So they have a data governance, they have an end-to-end data maintenance process, but it ends at the boundaries of the corporation. So they have, from cross-corporate perspective, they have these data silos, and they maintain all the rule sets, like described, the address formats, the tax number rules, all these tiny things on their own. And from cross-corporate perspective, there is much redundancy in this process. That's our point, right? To overcome this redundancy, to enable sharing on maintaining these things. And so the first level, these shared quality rules, is what I mentioned. You don't even have to share the rows, as you said, within each other. That's level 3 in this picture. But you can start to define the same rules, right? How, a CNPJ number in Brazil is structured. What is the checksum? Each company has to identify that to ensure data quality in their processes. And this is what you can do together, joint forces, right? And that's level 1, collect all the requirements, continuously maintain it. That changes, right? There's a new tax number in Dubai, for example. You have to get aware of that, and then you have to understand it and implement it.
And everybody's doing that. So before we move on to 2, I just want to reinforce sort of this idea of rules. How many rules? You've got this library of data quality rules, don't you?
Yes, exactly. Maybe we can also put this in the comments. There's a set of, I think, currently 1,500, 600 rules documented. It's publicly available, so you can access this in our portal. And this is some, let's say, first outcome of this data sharing community, that these rules are documented, they are maintained, they are updated, they are tested, and of course the platform we operate then makes use of it and then implements it.
I had somebody comment earlier when I just posted this, and they were going back and forth a little bit in LinkedIn and then in some DM about how, well, if this is outsourcing and, everybody's got their own rules. I've got my data governance rules and they have to be understood and implemented. I said, this is not outsourcing in a way that you're extending just your own workforce. This is truly built on a community aspect. And I would imagine people get more comfortable in that first stage by just looking at what I'm sure is similar rule set that they're trying to either create or replicate on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have this image in mind regarding this outsourcing question, that the data or the attributes, the columns in your image, we take care about are the, let's say, 5 to 6% of all the available attributes, but that take almost 80% of the effort. It's about the addresses, the text number, and all the stuff. And they are so costly at the end because it's an external reference. You as a corporation have to run behind to collect all the changes and maintain it in your system. And this is what we not really outsource, but put into this community, because the requirement is the same for everyone. It's the external reference, and you can do it collaboratively. It's not about the payment terms. It's not about the purchasing conditions. Of course, that's a corporate asset. It's a strategic advantage, maybe having this right and better than the competitors, but having a better legal entity address is not a competitive advantage, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can outsource, so to say, in the community. Yeah.
Okay, so you go. So now I'm moving from silos. Now I get some comfort level in terms of sharing the data governance rules. And then what's next?
Yeah, similar to the rules or the external requirements. Of course, you also have external data. There's a growing number of open data repositories, commercial trade registers that provide the content openly, and however, there's still a challenge to identify these sources and to map all the attributes to integrate that, right? We have collected, I think, more than 400 identifiers also in this repository, and you have to bring this knowledge together. You have to understand what is a text identifier, what is, a national identifier, a global identifier, and you have to map all these things to make use of these open data repositories. People think, okay, data is open, so we can just use it, copy to SAP and ready, but there's really high effort to integrate all these data. And this you can also do collaboratively because, again, the requirement and the data repositories are the same for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And so then, and that's where some of your external partners play in it too. I know some people have asked already if we can dig into it, Dun & Bradstreet, Bisnode, and so on. That's kind of the phase that they play in, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. There are great providers of data. Like, for example, Dun & Bradstreet, it's a partner of us, so you can also integrate the data we create in the community with these commercial data from providers. Of course, there are others like Brook van Dijk and so on. But these guys have, let's say, their competencies in the depth of the data, right? They collect the, number of employees, the revenue of a company, all the industry classification and so on. And at least in the current stage of open data, that's harder to achieve, even by web scrolling and all these fancy technologies. So you can buy it from these companies, and they offer it. And again, it's an integration effort, right, to map their understanding to the open data, to our view of the world. And this can be done collaboratively. So you can get a, let's say, integrated picture of this in-depth commercial data and the breadth of all open data that is around there.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to this last part here. So now you've got connectors and a common approach to get to some of these syndicated data providers who offer various different value.
Yeah.
What's the next step? And when we look at phase 3,
that's actually the final or the effective data sharing, as you described, the sharing of the roles, right? So you just can think about the community. We have all they have their data maintenance processes where they maintain their customer and their vendor data. And always when they update, for example, an address, a ship to, or if they create a new vendor, and if they are connected to our cloud, then this update or the new record is directly transported into our cloud, mapped to the data model, and put in the data pool. Of course, there's some quality assurance and some checks let's skip that part. But this is effectively the sharing of, as you said, the rows. You update it in your corporate system. It's sent to the cloud, and if someone else having the same supplier or vendor, this update is shared with them. That's on a very high level the mechanism of our data sharing platform.
So if one of your members finds an entity and it's new, they might share that with the rest of the community who might know about it or might not. But again, a new business that opens up might have a couple of different members of your community have some sort of relationship with it. So that kind of helps in terms of, okay, identifying new things and validating new entities. Do I have that right?
Yes, absolutely. So of course, if there's a new company somewhere and it comes into the database, then someone else maybe doesn't look up into our database, finds this record, maybe enriches a tax number that is missing and so on. So from this part, when the data enters the database the first time, the community is working, so to say, is maintaining this record according to governance, according to rule sets. So it's not just shit in. There are some processes around, but on a high level, it's the way it works. Yes.
I want to take a look at. I love this other exhibit here, which. So thanks for taking us through that journey part. It's this. I want to show people this here. This is one of my favorite slides because I get all geeky on kind of Rosetta Stone stuff. But just, you can talk us through this, Kai, but just wanted to point out for folks, there's a lot of unique identifiers out there. I think if I looked it up in the CDQ wiki, and they track 422 different unique identifiers that every one of those identifier sets have a valid use case somewhere. But when you think about it, everybody out there, if you've got your own data, which you all do, you have your own, let's say under that first column, your own customer number, your SAP number, your unique identifier, and then you want to start to map it to these other sources. Kai, if you could just sort of share some other thoughts about this particular exhibit.
Yes, for sure. So what you see here is just a snippet of our data matching engine where we try to aggregate and then combine data that comes in. And just to put this at the beginning, it's not the final output of this matching. It's just an example, right? Of course, there are many different legal entities therein. But in the first snippet there, in the first column, you see just the ID of the customer, of the community member there. And on the right-hand side, you see these general identifiers, but that's your point, they are not unique, right? Of course, for BVD, the ID is unique for sure. And for DUNS, the ID is unique. And in Poland, I would say you have, these are all Polish records here, you have, I think, 4 other national and tax identifiers. And you just have to bring this together. That's the challenge. But on the other hand, if you have maintained all these mappings, as you said, then you can make use of it, right? Because at least in most records, there is some kind of identifier maintained.
Mm-hmm. There's a real Rosetta Stone out there. So that's my view of it, that you really have this ongoing, well-governed, expertly stewarded cross-reference to all these multiple unique identifiers. And if you're in the space, there's probably not that much unique about a unique identifier anymore. There's so many of them. And so it's less about settling on one, and it's more about being able to cross-reference and connect among them, because you have to use a DUNS number in some cases. You want to use a BVD number in some cases. You must use your own internal number operationally. But then you have an LEI, legal entity identifier. You've got VAT for local tax. You can't choose just one. So having this cross-reference and this connection drives a lot of interoperability for the enterprises out there. So I thought that this was very unique. And a couple of people on here were asking about, okay, what's the difference between what we're talking about at CDQ and Dun & Bradstreet, for example. Obviously, Dun & Bradstreet is a separate syndicated master file of all these locations, great source of that insight and enrichment. But CDQ kind of sits in the middle because nobody can depend on only one source. And operationally, as an enterprise, you must have your own internal data. There's no way to replace it. So what else do we have here? So I think, this was from a wiki. So Kai mentioned this, and I think this is openly available. We'll put some links in here, and we'll follow up with folks. But in this case, they're showing they manage 422 unique identifiers, and there are just a couple on there for tax IDs and so on. It's really a maze out there of a lot of different numbers. So what I'd like to do is kind of scroll through here. Hopefully this has been interesting. We're not wrapping up totally yet, but I want to see what kind of questions we have from some of the folks. Hi from Switzerland. That's great. Yeah, we're talking about D&B. So is this something like Nielsen? Yeah, in a similar way. Again, not Nielsen it's not product movement, it's not media data, but it does have this consortium approach. The difference, I think, in terms of Nielsen is when you share data with Nielsen, you're not sharing at that granular level for the benefit of everybody else. So a retailer, and you're sharing it's a different domain. It's really product movement data rather than company data and relationships. So I think there's some definite differences here. This would be cloud-based and not customer identifiable. Chris, I think, yes, it is cloud-based, but the customer identifiable part, and Kai, jump in wherever you want here. Again, that's more for personal data. And also, why don't you speak a little bit about some of the things that people don't share, and that I think will give folks a comfort level.
Yeah, so maybe regarding this private data and individual data, of course, the difficulty there are gray zones, right? Like the sole properties or the single workers and so on. They are, on the one hand, legal entities, and they are handled like that from tax and so on. And on the other hand, there is private information in there because maybe the address is their private information, or their private address. And the challenge there for our customers is, of course, to separate, let's say, these records from the other clear B2B, or as you call it, commercial records. And just to give one example, because I also saw a question there regarding technology, machine learning, and all these things. Also, this challenge can be tackled with the community. And how we do it? We have set up some artificial intelligence to screen data by legal forms, by forenames, shore names, and all these things. We train a neural network to do this. And we can, by this, identify these private information records, like a doctor, a lawyer, all these single workers, from the other records. And then you can decide if you maybe skip them from your sharing. We delete them from our database to ensure it's only B2B data in there. So my point is, also for these advanced AI topics, the sharing approach really makes sense because we can collect the feedback from the community for false matches to improve, for example, this natural person screening.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Maria shared the link to the wiki. That's good. So anybody watching, just take a look in the comments there. Maria's with CDQ as well, so I appreciate that link. Anything else? I know we're gonna have let me pull this in here. There will be a webinar we're doing, a little more formal webinar, Kai and I, next week. So please sign up for that. We'll probably take you through more of maybe some of the functionality and actually some of the input we got today to kind of present that a little more formally. Ragnar mentioned, would you say this approach is more for analytical MDM purposes, or could it be deployed at the operational level? My opinion is it's absolutely operational. You know from their own experience there. What are you seeing, Kai, in terms of people using it?
Yes, absolutely. So our partners use it directly in their maintenance processes. So first step, maybe to dive one level deeper, and as Scott said, we can provide in the next week webinar some examples on that, also regarding the architecture and processes. But just in a nutshell, you can integrate, for example, the community data pool to do a lookup in your operational process at the beginning to find the record, just copy-paste a validated record. Then you can, for example, integrate your workflow to get updates from the community. So if someone else shares an update for a record you also have, then this update pops up, I don't know, as a working item in your MDG SAP workflow or whatever you use there. So it's really deeply integrated into the operational workflows and systems.
Okay,
and, the analytical part is just maybe for the project things when you consolidate databases and check for outdated text numbers and so on. Of course, you can use the software there, but the major part from the community is for the operational processes.
Yeah, which I think that makes it particularly strong. So, any other thoughts? I don't know if there's any other questions. We're going to try and stay close to time here. Can data quality help us in savings opportunities? I would imagine so. Just a blanket answer to that is yes. Better data is always better is my answer to that question. And again, from my perspective, and I see a lot of stuff, doesn't really replace, what it replaces in my mind, is the work that companies are doing inside to just get the basics right. Doesn't replace another software system, doesn't replace a department, but that work is really drudgery. I mean, it's not the high value work. It's certainly not something that, data scientists want to play around with, but it's really critical because you don't call it the foundation for nothing.
Yes, absolutely. So I sometimes say this is if you share data quality, it's like if you share love, right? You can get more by sharing at the end.
There you go.
You have more eyes looking on the data. You have less defects. You have faster updates. It's not that you give something away, but you get more. And this is the way I think you have to look on that. This is why I introduced this with. It's not. Of course, data sharing sounds better. If you name it data quality sharing, it's a bit weird. But at the end, it's shared data quality. It's the up-to-dateness that is shared, actually.
That's beautiful there. So, the love you take is equal to the love you make. I think that's the quote there from the Beatles. It's a lovely way to put it there. So, data love, everybody. Well, Kai, this has been great. I'm going to kind of wrap it up with a couple of thoughts here and see if there's any other questions. But thank you so much for joining us today. And again, we're going to be doing this more formal webinar next week, but thank you very much, Kai. We'll see you.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So, everybody, I really think this is a, whoops, sorry, let me get the right one here. There we go. Hold on, my technical piece here. So just to kind of wrap it up, I think as part of this, what you start to see on the benefit side, you start to see better access to trusted data. And when data is trusted, a lot more things can happen, just sort of putting it on that level. This idea of common rules, again, everybody feels like you're unique. I will tell you, and I have this unique perspective of seeing so many of you, you're not unique. You might be special, but you're not necessarily unique, especially at this level. So when you're looking for things like best practice advice, I hear this all the time. You've got this community, you've got this association with the University of St. Gallen, this Data Quality Competency Center. There's a lot of resources that I think people can dip into. This idea of trying to understand vertical standards, we all deal with them, again, in a community basis, reference data sources, third-party enrichment services. You're all trying to do very similar things. So why not partner up with some of your peers and have a more common approach to that and get these objective quality metrics? I think that's something that we all strive for. How am I doing versus my peers? How am I benchmarking my quality, which, I rant on is very emotional, very subjective kind of dimension there, very difficult to really truly understand the quality, the coverage, the structure, the connectability of your data. So I really appreciate everybody's time here today. Again, we're going to have this webinar, which I'll put a link in the comments for. But I want to thank all of you for sticking in here. We had a good retention rate on folks. Again, if you're interested, please just type the word share in the comments, and we'll make sure we'll follow up with you. This is not a big, heavy pitch here. It's just something that I really feel, again, I wanted to share the love, as Kai said, around this unique concept that I haven't seen anywhere. So that's about it, I guess. So Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer, thrilled to be back on the air again. And seeing everybody stay safe. And remember, good decisions made on bad data are just bad decisions you don't know about yet. Thank you all very much. Cheers.